They told me to ask my daughter for the money. My own son had a business worth $8 million, and his wife told me, straight to my face, to go ask the substitute teacher instead. That's the kind of sentence that lodges itself behind your ribs like a fishbone. I didn't say a word back to Diane that night. 63 years old, and I just sat there at my own dinner table like a guest waiting to be excused. But before I tell you the rest of it, I want you to understand something. This isn't a story about money, not really. It's a story about who still shows up once you've got nothing left to hand them. Let me back up. I live in a two-bedroom house off Route 9 outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the kind of house a young couple buys thinking they'll trade up in 5 years. 28 years later, I'm still here. The porch step's been cracked since the Obama administration. I keep meaning to pour a new one. It was a Thursday evening in early June, warm enough that the window unit was already fighting a losing battle, and I was going through a stack of mail at the kitchen counter I didn't much want to open. A past due notice from PPL Electric. A letter from my cardiologist's office that I already knew wasn't good news, because good news doesn't come folded in an envelope that thick. Diane's phone rang from the counter. I watched her whole face rearrange itself, like somebody had reached behind her eyes and flipped a switch. There it is, I thought. The only smile that still gets aimed in this house, and it's not for me. Marcus, honey, she practically sang it into the phone. Tell me everything. I set my coffee mug down. Is that Marcus? Let me say hello. She didn't even glance my way. Just turned her whole body, like I was a draft coming through a window she needed shut, and walked into the living room. I caught pieces of it anyway. Something about a contractor buyout. Something about a number with 6 zeros on the end of it. A contract with the state, Marcus? I'm so proud of you, baby. You always did have your grandfather's head for business. God rest him. I sat there at that counter and listened to my wife of 32 years talk to our son like he'd just been knighted for closing a paving contract, instead of just doing his job. I'm not telling you that to sound bitter. I'm telling you because it's true, and because you need to understand what ordinary looked like in my house before I tell you what happened next. She hung up eventually, still glowing, walked back into the kitchen, and the glow dropped clean off her face the second she looked at me, like she'd peeled off a mask at the door. He's doing so well, Walter. That's good, I said, and I meant it. Whatever had gone sideways between me and that boy over the years, I never once wished him bad luck. Diane didn't say anything else, just slid the PPL bill across the counter toward me. Didn't ask if I was all right. Didn't ask about the cough I'd been blaming on spring pollen for a month. Take care of this before they shut it off again, she said. Again, like it was a habit of mine, like I was the habit. Now, here's the part where I'm supposed to make myself sound better than I am, and I won't do that. I'm going to tell you the truth, because the truth is worse than anything I could invent, and it's the only thing that actually matters here. 15 years ago, I wasn't some fool who blew the family savings at a card table in Atlantic City. I ran a small hardware and lumber supply out past Hershey. Nothing fancy, but steady, and I was good at it. I'd put every dime I had into expanding into a second lot near the interstate, right where the county was planning a new exit ramp. Everybody said I was sharp for it. Diane bragged about it to her sisters. Then the county rezoned the parcel for a wetlands buffer after a environmental survey turned up protected salamander habitat, of all things, and the whole expansion got frozen under a conservation easement before I ever broke ground. Couldn't sell it. Couldn't build on it. Couldn't do a blessed thing except keep paying the taxes and watch my credit collapse in slow motion. The bank called my loans. My supplier contracts dried up, and Diane never once asked if I was okay. She asked how fast I was going to fix it. That was 15 years ago. I've clerked at a big box hardware store on the overnight restocking crew ever since, 6 nights a week most months, coming home smelling like cardboard and forklift exhaust. And somewhere in the middle of all that, my son turned 22 and decided his whole young life had been ruined because his father couldn't cover a deposit on a downtown apartment he wanted to share with his college buddies. He never forgave me for that. Not once, not even after I sat him down and explained the whole mess. In his mind, I'd gambled the family's future and lost, and he was the one who paid for it. Maybe a man needs a villain sometimes. I used to think that. And I was standing right there, ready-made. My daughter's different. Grace is 28, works as a home health aide over in Hershey, driving her little sedan between 4 or 5 clients a day, wiping down oxygen tubing and changing bandages for people who used to run their own lives and can't anymore. She was 13 when the salamander survey killed my expansion, old enough to remember the bigger house we almost had, old enough to watch me rebuild something small out of nothing, instead of just mourning what got taken. She came by 2 nights after that phone call with Marcus, carrying a casserole dish of chicken and rice, my favorite, heavy on the paprika the way my own mother used to make it. She didn't say one word about bills, or Marcus's contract, or any of it. Just set the dish down, kissed the top of my head, and said, "You still coughing like that, old man?" "Just allergies, baby." She didn't believe me. Never did. "You're seeing Dr. Alsop on Monday. Don't argue with me." I didn't argue. Never much point arguing with Grace. She'd inherited that stubborn streak from somebody, and I had my suspicions it was me. Dr. Alsop wasn't smiling when he came back into that exam room. He set the folder down on the counter like it weighed 40 pounds. "Walter, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. There's a mass on your kidney. The good news is it's operable. The bad news is it needs to come out soon. Weeks, not months." There it is, I thought, the other shoe. "Okay," I said, "because what else do you say?" So we scheduled it. That's when the woman from billing came in, a tired, kind-faced woman named Pam, and told me my insurance had a coverage gap on the specific surgical approach Dr. Alsop wanted to use. "Out of pocket before we can put you on the schedule. $4,000. I can look into a payment plan," Pam said, "but the surgical team needs the deposit before they'll book the OR. Hospital policy. $4,000. You want to know something funny? I used to clear more than that some months, back before the salamanders. Now I sat in my truck in that parking lot of '08 Ranger with the AC barely holding on, and did the math 6 different ways, and every single time it landed the same place. I didn't have it. My credit was still wrecked from the land. No bank in Dauphin County was going to look twice at me. $4,000, I thought. And I've got a son sitting on an $8 million paving contract. I told myself I wouldn't call him. Told myself that for 2 full days. Then I called him anyway, because that's what a father does. You swallow what's left of your pride and you call your son, and you hope, God, you hope he's still in there somewhere underneath all that polish. He picked up on the 5th ring, and I could hear it right off glasses clinking, somebody laughing too loud, a woman's voice saying something about a bottle of Woodford Reserve. "Dad, hey, can this wait? We're at the club, celebrating the Turnpike Authority thing. Marcus, I need to talk to you about something serious." "Yeah, okay. Give me a sec." Muffled sound, like he'd covered the phone. Then, "All right, go." I told him all of it. The mass, the surgery, the coverage gap, the $4,000 I needed by end of week, or they wouldn't put me on the schedule. There was a pause. A long one. Long enough that for one stupid second I thought, maybe, his voice went flat, cold. "I just spent 15 years digging this family out of the hole your land deal put us in. You know how hard I worked to build what I've got, and now you want me to pull cash out of it for what? More bad luck? Marcus, this isn't the land. This is my kidney. And you brought this on yourself, Dad. Somehow you always do. Ask the hospital for a payment plan." A 4-second pause. Then, quieter, meaner. "I've got a reputation in this county now, Dad. I can't keep carrying you." The line went dead, just like that. My son hung up on me while I sat in a hospital parking lot with a tumor in my kidney so he could get back to his bourbon. I called Diane next, told her everything. Asked if she'd talk to him, soften him up some. "Don't you dare go ruin this for him," she snapped. "He worked hard to get away from your mess. Grace has got a job, doesn't she? Go ask her." She said Gwen. After 28 years, my own wife still couldn't get our daughter's name right when she was too busy being angry to think straight. I hung up and sat in that truck a long, long while. Didn't cry. I was past crying by then. Just sat there thinking about how a man could work his whole life trying to give his family everything and end up alone in a ranger outside a hospital doing math that never came out right. I met Grace 2 days later at a diner off Route 39, the kind of place with vinyl booths and a waitress who calls everybody hun. I hadn't planned on telling her a thing. I was going to smile, eat my meatloaf, let her think everything was fine. She knew before I opened my mouth. She always did. Dad, she set her fork down. What's wrong? Tell me right now. So I told her. And I want you to understand, I was ashamed. Ashamed to be sitting across from my 28-year-old daughter, a home health aide who probably didn't have $4,000 to her name, about to ask her for money her own brother had turned down cold. I didn't even finish the sentence. Grace reached into her bag and set an envelope on the table. Then she turned her phone around so I could see the screen. A notification from a lending app. Approved. $2,200. Dad, stop talking. Her eyes were wet, but her voice didn't shake at all. There's 1,800 cash in there. I sold my grandmother's ring this morning. Grace, my throat closed right up. You sold Nana's ring? Rings can be replaced, Dad. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand hard, the way you grab something you're not letting go of twice. You can't. I picked up a night shift at the assisted living place on Tuesdays. It's fine. I don't sleep much anyway. I sat in that booth and wept in front of a waitress named Sherry and half the lunch crowd at a diner off Route 39. My daughter, the one who didn't have an $8 million contract to her name, the one nobody ever bragged about on the phone, held my hand across a Formica table and told me I was going to be all right. She's the only one who ever really saw me, I thought. The only one who ever really did. I had no idea, sitting in that diner, how much that morning was about to matter. I had no idea what was still sitting out there, 12 acres past the old feed mill, waiting on me. But that's the next part of this. Stay with me. A letter showed up at my daughter's apartment while I was still healing from surgery, and it was worth more than every dollar my son ever refused me. I want you to sit with that a second, because I did. I sat with it for 4 days before I told a living soul. But let's not get ahead of things. Let me take you back to the morning of the surgery first, because you need to know what it cost me to get to that letter. They wheeled me into pre-op at 6 in the morning on a Tuesday in late June, and the last thing I remember before the anesthesia pulled me under was Grace's face, right up close to mine, her hand squeezing my fingers. "You're going to be fine, old man," she said. "I already told the nurses you're too stubborn to do anything else. They said stubborn people heal faster." Where'd she learn to be this brave, I thought. 28 years old and steadier than I've ever managed to be in my whole life. Then the lights went out. I woke up 9 hours later with a tube down my throat and an ache in my side like somebody had parked a truck on it. Dr. Alsop came by that evening, still in his scrubs, leaned down close so I could hear him over the monitor. "We got clean margins, Walter. You did good." I didn't cry, didn't have the energy. I just lay there thinking about my mother's ring sitting in some pawnbroker's case with a stranger's fingerprints on it now. She bought me this, I thought, not the hospital, not the insurance company. My daughter bought me this, with a lending app and a ring that had been in our family since before I was born. I'm going to make this right, I told myself. However long it takes. I don't care if I'm 70, 90 years old. I'm going to make this right. I had no idea how soon that promise was going to come due. I spent the next 2 weeks recovering on Grace's fold-out couch. Because my own house sat empty most days and I wasn't about to lie up there alone listening to my own breathing machine. Diane hadn't so much as texted to ask how the surgery went. Grace's place was small. A one-bedroom off Chocolate Avenue near the hospital. The kind where you can hear your upstairs neighbor's TV through the ceiling. She had her work schedule taped to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a candy bar right next to a photograph of the two of us at some county fair years back. I looked at that schedule every single morning. She's out there right now, I thought, driving between 4 strangers' houses in a car with 190,000 miles on it, and Marcus is out celebrating a state contract in a car he leases new every 2 years. She'd come home most evenings still in her scrubs, smelling like hand sanitizer and somebody else's coffee, check my incision, heat up something easy for dinner. She wasn't much of a cook, my Grace, but she tried. She'd sit with me and watch whatever true crime show was on, and never once, not one single time, did she bring up the Ring or the lending app or ask when I'd pay her back. That's the difference, I thought, watching her doze off sitting up in a kitchen chair one night, still in her work clothes. Marcus gives, so people will notice. Grace gives like it never once occurred to her not to. It was a Wednesday, 17 days after the surgery, when the mail carrier knocked instead of just leaving it in the box. Grace was working a double. I answered the door in my robe, still moving slow, still tender through the ribs. Got something certified here, the carrier said. Need a signature. 2 letters, actually. One was from an outfit I didn't recognize right off Keystone Logistics Partners. The other had a return address I knew instantly, because I'd been getting mail from them for 15 straight years. Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. Here we go, I thought. Another update. Another 6 months of nothing. Another form letter telling me the conservation review's still ongoing. Don't touch the land, don't build, don't sell, don't breathe on it wrong. I almost set it on the counter unopened and went back to the couch. Something made me sit down at Grace's little kitchen table instead and tear it open right then. I read it twice. Then a third time, slower, because I didn't trust my own eyes. Habitat mitigation complete. Site released from environmental review, effective June 2nd. Complete. 15 years. 15 years of taxes on land I couldn't touch. 15 years of my credit sitting in the gutter. 15 years of my own wife looking at me like a stain on the family carpet. And it was sitting right there in black and white. Done. Released. Clean. I set that letter down like it might go off if I moved too fast. Then I opened the second one. Keystone Logistics Partners. Turned out that while my 12 acres had been locked under review, the interstate exit I'd bet everything on 15 years ago had finally been built, half a mile from my property line, and a national distribution outfit was scrambling to buy up every parcel near it for a new regional warehouse hub. Land that used to be worthless salamander swamp was now sitting inside a logistics corridor everybody wanted a piece of. The letter was an offer. A real one, with numbers behind it. $8.2 million, cash, 45-day close. I read that figure maybe 20 times. I want to tell you I hollered and ran around that little apartment like a fool. I didn't. I sat very, very still. 8 million, I thought. And 4 weeks ago, I was crying in a diner because I couldn't scrape together 4,000. I looked up, and my eyes landed right back on that work schedule stuck to the fridge with a candy bar magnet. My daughter's handwriting in the margin double shift, Thursday. Don't forget insulin check for Mrs. Palermo. She'd rearranged her whole life at 28 years old to keep her father breathing, and here I was holding $8 million. That's the moment something in me went quiet and cold and very, very clear. I didn't call Diane. I didn't call Marcus. I want you to remember that, because it matters for what comes later. I never hid this money from anybody. I just didn't see one reason to tell people who'd already told me, in their own words, that my problems weren't their problems. Why would I call them, I thought, when 3 weeks ago they'd made it painfully clear whose problem I was. I called somebody else instead. Ed Kowalski. He'd handled my business affairs back before the wetlands mess. One of the only professionals who stuck by me after everything fell apart, mostly because I still paid him what little I could. On time, every time. Ed, it's Walter. Walter, good Lord, how you feeling? Grace mentioned the surgery went. Ed, I need you to look at some paperwork for me today, if you can. Something in my voice must have told him this wasn't a check-in call. What's going on? I told him. The DEP release, the Keystone offer, the number. Long pause on the line. Long enough I thought the call had dropped. 8.2 million, he finally said. Walter, that changes everything. I know it does. I looked at that fridge schedule one more time. That's exactly why I need you to pull something else from me first, before we touch that offer. You remember a document Diane had you draw up about 6 years back? Ed went quiet. The property partition, I said. The one Marcus pushed for. I remember it real well, Walter. Told her at the time I didn't love it, but she was insistent, and it was her legal right, given the debt exposure. I want you to pull it. Read me exactly what it says, word for word. Don't leave anything out. Because if I remembered that document right, I thought, Diane hadn't just protected herself from my failures. She'd signed away every claim to whatever came next, good or bad. Ed called back 2 hours later, papers shuffling on his end. Walter, I'm going to read you the operative clause here. Diane Reyes hereby waives, releases, and forever discharges any and all present or future marital claim, interest, or right, legal or equitable, in and to the real property located in Dauphin County described herein, including any proceeds, appreciation, or value realized thereon, regardless of cause. Regardless of cause, I said, real slow. Ed, does that mean what I think it means? It means exactly what we drew up, Walter. 6 years ago, she wanted the house and her retirement account walled off, so she partitioned the estate. She took the house as her sole separate property and forced you to take 100% ownership of the 12 acres, debt and all, as yours. Notarized. Binding the day it was signed. Whatever happens to that land now, good, bad, or an $8 million sale, she signed away every legal claim to it. Marcus was the one who pushed her into it, wasn't he? Set the whole meeting up. Told his mother it was smart. Told her it'd protect her credit if the land ever got seized over your debts. I almost laughed. Nothing about it felt funny, exactly, but I almost laughed anyway. Well, Ed said, exhaling slow, son of a gun, he sure was smart. Just not in the direction he thought he was being smart. I sat there at Grace's kitchen table with the afternoon light coming through those thin blinds, and for the first time in 15 years I felt something in my chest that wasn't shame and wasn't grief. It was clarity, plain and cold. Ed, I want to move on the Keystone offer. Quiet. I don't want a single soul outside this call knowing till it's done. Not Diane. Not Marcus. Especially not Diane and Marcus. I looked at that fridge schedule again. Draw up whatever needs drawing up. I want the sale closed, and I want a trust set up right alongside it. Irrevocable. In Grace's name. Ed didn't say anything for a second. All of it, Walter? The whole 8.2? Every dime, after the debts get cleared. My voice didn't shake, and that surprised me more than anything else that day. She sold her grandmother's ring for me, Ed. Took out a loan at some ungodly interest rate so I could get on a table. She's been running a double shift every Thursday for a month so she'd have gas money and I'd have a place to heal. Meanwhile, my son told me to ask the hospital for a payment plan, and my wife told me not to ruin his celebration. So no, I'm not splitting this 2 ways for the sake of looking fair. Fair already happened. Fair happened in a diner off Route 39 a month ago, and only one of my children showed up for it. I hear you, Walter. I'll have paperwork ready by Friday. One more thing. Don't put my name on the deed for the house I'm buying her, either. Trust owns it outright. I don't want one piece of this anybody can argue over later. I want it airtight. Airtight, Ed said. Understood. I hung up and sat there a long while in that quiet apartment, listening to the window unit hum, looking at that little schedule stuck to the fridge. They're going to find out eventually, I thought. And when they do, they won't come here asking how I'm feeling. They'll come asking about money. That's just who they are now. Maybe who they always were, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. I wasn't wrong about that. Hold on to that thought, because it's exactly what happened, but not the way I expected, and not for the reason I expected. See, I figured Marcus and Diane would show up, because word of the land had gotten out. It hadn't. They didn't know a thing about it yet when they showed up at Grace's door 11 days later. They came because Marcus was drowning in a mess of his own making, and he needed cash so badly he was willing to walk right into the one place he'd sworn he'd never set foot in his broke, embarrassing father's temporary bedroom on his sister's fold-out couch. He had no idea what was waiting for him there. Neither did Diane, but I did. I'd had 11 days to get ready. End quote. 11 days. That's how long I had between hanging up with Ed and hearing that first hard knock on Grace's door. 11 days to get the paperwork settled, sign what needed signing, and sit with the strangest feeling I'd had in a decade. Patience. It didn't hurt a bit. I want to tell you I spent those days plotting some grand speech. I didn't. Mostly I healed. walked a little farther every morning around the parking lot, sat on Grace's little balcony in the evenings and watched the sun go down, thinking about 12 acres of land that had finally, after 15 years, stopped punishing me. Then that Thursday evening came, and somebody pounded on the door hard enough to rattle it in the frame. Dad. Dad, open up. I know you're in there. Marcus's voice, loud, frayed at the edges in a way I'd never heard from him before. Not the smug, satisfied Marcus from the club. Something else was underneath it now. Grace got to the door before I did, still in her scrubs, and pulled it open with a look on her face. I recognized the same one she probably gave patients' relatives who overstepped. You want to explain why you're pounding on my door like a bill collector? Marcus pushed past her without answering. Diane right behind him. Picture it, my son, 32 years old, tie already loosened, sweat on his collar though the AC was running fine. My wife behind him, arms crossed, jaw set hard. Neither one of them looked at me and asked how I was healing. Not one word about the surgery. Not one word about the scar still tender under my shirt. Dad. Marcus's voice cracked, just slightly, right in the middle. We need to talk. Now. There it is, I thought. Not how are you feeling? Not, I'm sorry, I hung up on you outside a hospital. Straight to business. Same as always. Sit down, Marcus, I said. You look about to have a heart attack of your own. He didn't sit. He paced. I was looking at the county deed records today. Keystone Logistics just filed a memorandum. 12 acres past the old feed mill. That's your land, Dad. 8.2 million cash. You sold it. Diane's mouth fell open. 8 Walter. Is that true? So that's how they found out, I thought. Not from me. From a public filing. Almost funny, in a sick sort of way. It's true, I said, calm as I could manage. Closed 11 days ago. 11 days? Marcus's voice climbed. You've had this 11 days and didn't call me? Your own son? I looked at him a long moment before answering. Last time I called you, Marcus, you were at the club celebrating a contract while I sat in a hospital parking lot trying to figure out how I'd pay for surgery. You told me it wasn't your problem. So no, I didn't feel much urgency to call the second something good happened, either. That should have been the moment he softened. It wasn't. You hid this from us. His finger came up. Jabbing toward me like that would make the words truer. You knew the review was wrapping up. You knew that land was about to be worth something. You let us think you were broke this whole time. Mom's driving a 9-year-old Malibu, Dad, while you sat on a fortune, just waiting to hand it to your favorite. He actually believes that, I thought. He's rewriting the whole thing in real time, right in front of me, and he believes every word coming out of his own mouth. Marcus. My voice came out quieter than his, which somehow made the room go quieter too. I didn't know that land was worth a dime until 17 days ago. Found out sitting on your sister's fold-out couch, recovering from surgery she paid for. You want to talk about hiding things? I didn't hide a fortune from this family. I hid the fact that I was scared out of my mind for 15 straight years, because every time I tried to talk about it, your mother told me to fix the bill, and you told me I ruined your 20s. Diane stepped in, arms still crossed, chin up. Don't you dare stand there and play the victim, Walter. I stood by you for 32 years while you dragged this family through the mud with your land schemes. That money belongs to this family. You're being vindictive, cruel. You're being stingy, Marcus finished for her. It's disgusting. Stingy. I nearly laughed out loud at that one. A man who refused his own father $4,000 for kidney surgery, calling his father stingy over $8 million. We're not asking anymore, Marcus said. And here's where his voice really shifted. Dropped, low, mean. The voice of a man who thought he was about to win. Mom's filing for divorce tomorrow morning. Financial abandonment, irreconcilable differences, the works. My lawyer's already drafting a motion to freeze every account tied to that sale until the courts sort out an equitable split. You hid marital assets, Dad. That's not a gray area. That's fraud. He slammed his hand flat on Grace's kitchen table, the same table where weeks earlier his sister had slid an envelope of cash across without a second thought. You're going to be tied up in litigation so long you won't have a cent left when we're through. I glanced at Grace's face, my daughter's kitchen table, and he just put his fist to it like he owned the place. I looked at Marcus a long moment. Then Diane. Then I stood up, slow and careful, still tender through the ribs, and reached into my jacket pocket. You want to talk about lawyers, Marcus? Let's talk about lawyers. I pulled out two folded documents and slid the first one across to Diane. You remember this? She looked down, and I watched the color drain out of her face before she'd even finished the first paragraph. 6 years ago, I said, you and Marcus sat me down at my own kitchen table. You were scared, genuinely scared the bank would come after your assets because of my land debt. Marcus's idea, by the way, his brilliant idea. Told you it was smart, told you it'd protect your credit if the debt ever caught up with the property. So, you signed this. Had your lawyer draft a partition agreement. You took the house and your accounts as your sole property, and legally forced me to take 100% of the land and every liability tied to it as mine. Read it again, I said, gentle as I could manage, because there wasn't one drop of satisfaction in me watching her hands start to shake. It doesn't say debt. It says regardless of cause. You didn't just protect yourself from my failure, Diane. Under Pennsylvania law, you converted that land into my separate property. You signed away any future claim to its value, regardless of cause, just to keep your hands clean of my mess. Your own lawyer walked you through it. Marcus signed as a witness. Marcus's face had gone pale too, but he wasn't done, never was. That doesn't matter, he snapped. I'll still take this to court. On grounds. On what grounds, Marcus? I slid the second document across to him. Take a look before you finish that sentence. He looked down. A bank statement. Grace's bank statement. $61, I said. That's what's sitting in your sister's checking account right now. $61, Marcus. Because a month ago she sold her grandmother's ring and took out a loan at 24% interest so I could get on an operating table. While you were ordering top-shelf bourbon to celebrate a contract, your sister was working a double shift on a Thursday so she'd have gas money to get to a job that pays her $38,000 a year, changing dressings for people who can't do it themselves. I let that sit a second. You want to talk about court, son? Go ahead. Bring every lawyer in Dauphin County. But before you do, go ahead and explain to a judge how you plan to claim a share of assets your own mother legally waived, in writing, 6 years ago, on your own advice. Explain to that judge where you were the night your father needed $4,000 for kidney surgery, and where your sister was. Nobody said a thing for a long moment. Just the window unit humming, and somewhere upstairs a neighbor's television bleeding through the ceiling, same as it had every night for the last month. I didn't hide this money from you, I said, and my voice finally came down soft, tired. Done. I found out about the land's release sitting right here, on that fold-out couch, barely 2 weeks after surgery. Took 45 days to close. Trust was finalized last week. I didn't keep it quiet to be petty, Marcus. I kept it quiet because I needed time to make sure it went to the one person who'd actually earned it. But I want you both to hear me. Even if I'd known sooner, even if I'd had months of warning, it wouldn't change one single thing about this moment. I looked at Diane first, then Marcus. You two divorced yourselves from this family a long time ago. You just hadn't gotten around to the paperwork yet. The trust's already finalized, I said. Irrevocable. The full 8.2 goes to Grace. All of it. First thing Ed did this morning was wire a payoff to that lender to burn her loan contract to ash. Next, he paid off the note on this whole apartment building so she doesn't owe a dime in rent while her new house gets finished. There's a car waiting on her, nicer than the one she still drives, though she's going to fuss at me about that. And I funded a scholarship at the community college for home health aides who can't afford their certification. I folded my hands on the table. You're both officially free of my mistakes now. Isn't that what you wanted? 15 years I heard about how I ruined this family. Well, congratulations. The ruin's over. Turns out you two signed yourselves right out of everything that came after it. Diane's mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time in longer than I could remember, my wife didn't have a single word. Marcus just stood there, jaw working, staring at that bank statement like it might rearrange itself into different numbers if he looked hard enough. Get out of my daughter's home, I said. Quiet, final, both of them. They left in a silence I'd never once heard out of either of them. In 32 years of marriage and 32 years of raising that boy, no slammed door, No last word. Just two people walking out of an apartment, realizing in real time that the very cleverness Marcus had always been so proud of, the legal maneuver he'd talked his own mother into, was the exact thing that had locked them both out of a fortune neither one of them would ever see a dime of. Grace stood in the kitchen doorway after they'd gone, arms wrapped around herself, watching me. Dad. Her voice was barely a whisper. You didn't have to give me all of it. Yeah, I said. I did. I walked over and put my arm around her, careful of my ribs. And we stood there a minute in that little apartment that wouldn't be hers much longer, not because she was losing it, but because she was finally getting more than she'd ever thought to ask anybody for. Rings can be replaced, I remembered her telling me, weeks before, sliding an envelope across a diner table. You can't. She'd been right about that. Turned out I couldn't be replaced either, not to her. And in the end, that was worth more than any number Keystone Logistics ever put on a piece of paper. We stood there in the quiet, my daughter and me, finally safe, finally free, and somewhere across town, my son sat down that night to figure out how he was going to explain to his own creditors that an $8 million contract on paper wasn't nearly enough to save him now, and there wasn't a single soul left in his corner willing to bail him out. Funny how that works out.